Hi, welcome to Rules Challenge. My name's Carter Maxwell, and in this episode we're going to be taking a look at the game Dune Imperium. Now, for those of you who are new to the show, it's basically just a test of your understanding of the rules, but instead of just asking you questions from the rule book, it's more like you're watching a real game being played and trying to catch when mistakes are made. I break the game up into numbered sections, and at the end of each section, it's your job to figure out if what you saw was legal or illegal. I deliberately emphasize rules that people tend to misunderstand or forget. So in addition to being a challenge, it's also sort of like an FAQ. Before we start the challenge, I should note that I am playing with just the base game here. I know some people prefer to play with the Rise of Ix expansion, but I'm perfectly happy just playing the base game. But the important thing is that, my videos are focused mostly on new players or people who are fairly new to the game. And I think, most people's introduction to the game will be just playing the base rather than the base plus the expansion. As is the case with most of my videos, we're picking up the action with the game already well underway. You can see there's already been some movement up the faction tracks, and we've played 2 rounds already, and now we're starting on a third one here. It looks like Red currently has the start player marker, so we'll start things off with them. Red wants to use the Cell Melange space, which will require playing a card with the yellow triangle. So he'll play his Signet Ring card, which has that symbol, and he'll place an agent on the space. He already has 2 spice, which would allow him to get 6 Solari, but he actually wants to get up to 8, so he'll be able to take the Swordmaster action later. So to get that 3rd spice, he's first going to activate his Signet Ring ability. His Signet Ring ability is called Spice Hoard, and that allows him to gain 1 spice when he plays his Signet Ring card. So he'll gain that 1 spice. And then he'll immediately spend those 3 spice. And then he'll gain the 8 Solari as indicated on the space. And that completes his turn. One of the most common questions in this game is some variation on what is the order of operations? Or in other words, when you play a card, what has to happen next? The rules actually give you a fair amount of flexibility in how you resolve your turn, but on an agent turn, there's 3 steps that have to happen before anything else. The first is play the card. The second is place your agent. And the third is pay the costs or meet the requirements of the space where you're placing your agent. Once you've done those 3 things, then you can go on and resolve the other effects in your turn. Red broke that rule in a fairly subtle way. Right when he placed that agent, he needed to decide how many spice he was going to convert into Solari. He had 2 spice at the time he placed his agent, so he should have paid those and gained 6. Instead, what he did was waited and resolved his Signet Ring ability to gain another spice, then spent the 3 and gained the 8 Solari. That's not the correct order of operations. Again, the order always has to be the same at the start of an agent turn. Play a card, place an agent, pay the fee. Once you've done those 3 things, then you can resolve the remaining effects in the order you want. Next up is Yellow, or the Beast, and he'll play the Dagger card for that green pentagon. That will allow him to place an agent on the Rally the Troops space. He has to spend 4 Solari to do that, so we'll pay 5 and get back 1. And then he'll resolve the effect of that space, which is to gain 4 troops. So he'll take 4 cubes from his supply and add them to his garrison area. And then he'll take 2 from the garrison and move them into the conflict. And that completes his turn. Yellow was doing everything fine on that turn until the very end when he moved those 2 cubes from his garrison into the conflict. Remember that gaining troops from your supply doesn't mean they're automatically eligible to be moved into the conflict. To do that, the space you put your agent on has to have this cross swords icon on it. The rally the troop space allows you to bring 4 cubes into your garrison, but it does not have the cross swords icon here, so they can only go into your garrison. They can't also be moved all the way into the conflict. All right, moving on to the blue player. She's going to play Imperial Spy, which will allow her to place an agent on one of the Emperor spaces. She'll place her agent on the Wealth space, which doesn't have any costs associated with it. Then she'll move her marker up, one on the Emperor track, and then she'll gain 2 Solari for that space. The Imperial Spy card does have an effect in the agent box. It says trash this card for an intrigue card, but Blue's going to opt to not use that and just go ahead and end her turn. People sometimes think that what Blue did there was illegal because she didn't resolve the effects in the agent box of that card. Their instincts are in the right place because most of the time the effects on a card are mandatory. But there are a few cases where it's optional, and if you want the full details on that, I would check out the official FAQ. In this particular case, the card says, trash this card to gain an intrigue card. The arrow is what makes this optional. It's essentially saying, if you trash this card, then gain an intrigue card. But you don't have to do it. Okay, moving on to green. He's going to play the Missionaria Protectiva card, and that has the purple circle agent icon on it. So he'll place his agent on the Arakeen space. That space doesn't have any costs associated with it, so I'll go ahead and start resolving effects. He has a control marker on that space, so he'll take 1 Solari. Then he can gain a cube from his supply and draw a card. So he'll draw the card and add it to his hand. Then he'll gain the cube from his supply, and since Arakeen had the cross swords icon on it, he'll add that cube directly to the conflict. And that completes his turn. Everything green did on that turn was legal. The one thing I could imagine people questioning is whether or not green should have gained a Solari for his control marker there, even though it was him who was placing an agent on that space. But that's fine. Whenever an agent is placed in a space with a control marker, the player who owns that marker gets the bonus, even if it's the same player who had placed the agent. As long as I'm talking about control markers, I should mention a rule that's super easy to forget in this game. If another conflict card comes up later in the game, that's another battle for Arakeen, green gets to place a cube from his supply directly into the conflict simply because he has that control marker in that region that's being contested. Before we move on, I should at least touch on how green had simply ignored this box. I think it was pretty obvious that he doesn't have another card in play at this point, but it is an effect that often confuses people, and I should talk about it. Don't worry about it for now, though, because I do have an example later where that type of effect comes up again, and I'll talk about it in more detail then. All right, we've come back around to red, and he'll play his Arrakis Liaison card, and that has the green and purple icons on it. So he'll place his agent on the Swordmaster space, and he'll pay 8 Solari for that. That will allow him to gain his agent that's been sitting off the board. He'll add that to his leaderboard, and the card he played doesn't have any agent box effects to resolve, so that'll end his turn. A question will occasionally come up about when you're supposed to receive the new agent when you take that Swordmaster space. Red did it correctly. You don't have to wait till the recall phase of the round when you take your agents back. You immediately place that new agent on your leaderboard and it's available for use on your very next turn. Now yellow's up again and he's going to play a diplomacy card, and that will allow him to place an agent on any of the 8 faction spaces on the left side of the board. And he'll place his agent on selective breeding, and that will require spending 2 spice, so he'll pay that. I always like to do this first because otherwise I forget. He'll move up 1 space on the Bene Gesserit track. Now he can trash a card to draw 2. For his trash card, he actually wants one from his discard pile, so he'll take his Dune the Desert Planet card and get rid of that. For the 2 new cards, he doesn't have a draw pile at the moment, so we'll shuffle up his discards a bit and draw 2 new ones and add them to his hand. And that'll end his turn. The thing I want to highlight from Yellow's turn is that he trashed a card from his discard pile. Maybe I'm the only one who was confused about this, but for my first couple of games, I thought the trash card had to come either from cards you'd already played or cards that were still in your hand. But you don't have to limit yourself that way. If you want to trash something that's already in your discard pile, that's acceptable too. Now it's Blue's turn, and before she does anything else, she's going to play an intrigue card because she needs a little more Solari for what she wants to do. So she'll play Windfall, which will give her 2 Solari. So she'll gain those 2 and discard the intrigue card. Then she's going to play the Guild Ambassador card that has the green pentagon agent icon on it. And then she'll place her agent on the High Council space. She'll pay the 5 Solari for that. And she'll place her disc on one of the seats. Now she's going to resolve the agent box, and she has 2 options. She can move up 1 on the Spacing Guild track, or she can take 2 spice, and she'll go with the spice. So we'll add those to her board. However, she has the Spice Addict ability, which says whenever you harvest spice, gain 1 spice less and draw a card. So instead of the 2, we'll make it 1 spice that she gains, and then she'll draw a new card from her deck and add it to her hand. And that will end her turn. The mistake the blue player made here was using Ariana's ability and taking 1 less spice and drawing a card. Now someone may look at that and say, well, isn't the Spice Addict ability mandatory? Yes, it is mandatory if you're harvesting spice. But harvesting spice isn't necessarily any time you gain spice. Harvesting spice is specifically the act of using one of the maker spaces on the board. In the present case, she gains spice from a card effect, which isn't harvesting spice, so she should not have activated this ability. All right, moving on to Green's turn. He's going to play the card Gene Manipulation. And he's going to make use of the purple circle icon and place his agent on the Carthage space, or however you say that. And it doesn't have any costs associated with it. He gets to gain an intrigue card, so he'll draw one of those and add it to his play area. And he gets to gain 1 troop from his supply. The space does have cross swords, so he's going to put it directly into the conflict. Now he's going to resolve the effects of the card he played. And first it says trash a card. He doesn't have any cards in his discard, so it's going to have to be one of these 2 or something in his hand. And he'll go ahead and get rid of this reconnaissance card. Then it says if you have another Bene Gesserit card in play, gain 2 spice. And he does have a Bene Gesserit card that he had just played on the previous turn, so he'll gain the 2 spice. This turn we saw the in-play effect that I mentioned earlier come up again, and this time green was able to use it to gain 2 spice. So what does it mean for a card to be in play? Here's what the rulebook says. Cards you play on agent turns and reveal during your reveal turn remain face up and in play until you clean up at the end of your reveal turn, unless they're trashed first. So cards still in your hand don't count, and cards in your discard pile don't count. On an earlier turn, when green played the Missionaria Protectiva card, that was the only card he had in play then, so it was not possible for him to benefit from having another Bene Gesserit card in play. When he played Gene Manipulation this turn, though, their set Missionaria Protectiva still in play. If you know the Dune universe very well, you know the Bene Gesserits are used to delayed gratification. Alright, we're back around to red. He was actually our start player, but by virtue of that Swordmaster space, he got his 3rd agent. So he'll take an agent turn and play his Dune the Desert Planet card. That just has a yellow triangle on it. So he'll place his agent on the Imperial Basin space. He doesn't have to pay any costs to do that. Then he can gain 1 spice from the supply and 1 from the maker space. And since that space has crossed swords, he'll take advantage of that and move a troop from his garrison into the conflict. There are no effects on the card that he needs to resolve, so that ends his turn. The only thing from that turn that I think might raise some eyebrows is that red had moved a cube from his garrison into the conflict, even though he hadn't gained any new troops during that turn. Remember, though, that the cross swords have 2 separate effects. One is they allow you to move all troops gained this turn into the conflict, which didn't apply here. And they allow you to move up to 2 troops from your garrison into the conflict. He happened to choose to just do 1, but the 2 effects are totally independent of one another. Yellow doesn't have any agents left, so he's going to do a reveal turn. I'll lay out the rest of the cards in his hand. Looks like he has a total of 6 persuasion points to spend. So he'll take a look at the Imperium row and reserve cards, see if there's anything he wants to obtain. This is kind of an unorthodox display. Just for table space, I've got the reserve cards here, and then my 5 Imperium row cards here. The display is kind of weak right now for somebody with 6 persuasion to spend. So he's just going to go ahead and take the scout for 1 persuasion and hopefully get something else in the display that's a little stronger. He'll put that card into his discard pile and refill the display. And that's a bit better. So he'll go ahead and take that Gunthopter for 4. He'll refill the display again. And he's just got 1 persuasion left to spend. He's not interested in assassination missions, so he'll just forego spending his last persuasion point. Now yellow has to set his strength. He has the 1 sword from his reveal cards, and then he gets 4 more swords from his 2 troops in the conflict for a total of 5, so we'll mark that. Then to wrap up his turn, he'll take all his cards in play and add them to his discard area. Kind of tight here with my small table. And that ends his turn. The part of this turn I wanted to highlight is that it was legal that yellow had immediately refilled the display after purchasing a card from it, and then even purchased the very card he had just used to refill the display. You always refill the display immediately after a card's been removed from it. Now it's time for blue to do a reveal turn. I'll lay out the rest of her cards. Oops. Looks like she has 4 persuasion and 1 sword. But we don't want to forget she has a seat on the High Council, so that's 2 more persuasion for a total of 6. And 6 persuasion is exactly what the Worm Rider's card costs, so she'll take that and add it to her discard pile. And she'll refill the display. Now she needs to set her strength. She had the one sword from her revealed cards, and she has 0 troops in the conflict, so she just has a total of 1, so she'll mark that. Then to finish up her turn, she'll move all her cards in play to her discard area. The mistake Blue made was in setting her strength to 1. Remember, if you don't have any troops in the conflict, your strength is 0, regardless of how many swords you may have during your reveal. You need at least 1 troop in the conflict to count any effects that give strength. Now green needs to do a reveal turn. I'm going to slide these out of the way for now. And he's got, let's see, 2 persuasion, 3, 4 persuasion, and 1 sword. With those 4 persuasion points, he's going to buy this copy of the Voice and this copy of the Voice. I'll put those in his discard area. And now he needs to set his strength. He has that 1 sword from Arrakis Recruiter, and he gets 4 more strength from his 2 troops in the conflict for a total of 5. And then he'll discard all his cards in play to wrap things up. Everything on that turn was legal. The only thing I can think of that might have looked a little weird was that a green had purchased 2 of the exact same card. Maybe I've just been playing too much Ark Nova lately where you can't buy 2 of the same building on the same turn. But in this case, that's perfectly fine. He can buy a copy of the Voice and another copy of the Voice in the same turn. There's no issue with that. Now red needs to do a reveal turn. We'll just slide these over a bit and reveal his last 2 cards. First off, we see that this card has a Fremen Bond effect, and that is activated by the fact that he does have this Arrakis Liaison card in play that is a Fremen card. And this shows that he can move up 1 space on the Fremen track. So we'll mark that. Then we'll check how much persuasion he has, and that's just 2. He'll spend those 2 on the Spice Smuggler's card and add it to his discard pile. And he'll refill the display. Now he needs to set his strength. He's got 1 point from swords. And he has 2 more points from his 1 troop for a total of 3. So we'll set his marker at 3. And to finish up his turn, he'll move all these cards to his discard area. Everything red did on that turn was correct, but we should take a minute to talk about Fremen Bond because that effect sometimes confuses people. So just looking at what red had in play, he had played these 3 cards here to place his agents, and then during his reveal he had these 2 cards. So one of them, the effect was Fremen Bond. Now people sometimes assume that Fremen Bond means that you have an alliance with the Fremen. But a bond and an alliance are 2 totally different things. In the rulebook, there are 2 sentences that describe how the Fremen Bond works. And I think the second sentence actually mostly just confuses people. Focus on the first sentence. It says, you may use this effect if you have 1 or more other Fremen cards in play. So when you have this effect during a reveal, just ask yourself that question. Do I have any other Fremen cards in play? Note the important word there, other. So in the present case, red plays a card during his reveal that has Fremen Bond. So he looks at every other card in play, finds he does have another Fremen card in play, the Arrakis Liaison. Thus, that effect gets triggered, and he can advance 1 on the Fremen track. Moving on to the combat phase, we have 3 players with troops in the conflict. And red is first in player order, so he has a chance to play a combat card. He'll pass. Next is yellow, and he will play a combat card, and that is Tiebreaker. That will give him 2 swords. So that'll give him 2 more strength, so he'll go from 5 to 7. All right, now it's green's turn, and he'll just choose to pass. So it'll come back to red, and now that red sees that yellow played a combat card, he'd like to play one as well, and he'll play ambush, and that is 4 swords, so that'll move him from 3 to 7. Now it comes back to yellow. He's going to pass. Green will pass again, and red will pass. So now we can figure out the final result of our combat. Looks like red and yellow tied for first, and green was third. Now to hand out the rewards, red and yellow tied for first, so that means they'll each take the second place reward, so they'll take 2 water each. And green took third place, so he'll gain 1 water. So we'll move on to just returning everybody's troops in the conflict to their supplies. And then we'll return all the combat markers to 0. There were a couple things in this combat phase that I think are worth discussing. First, notice that red was the first one with an opportunity to play a combat card. He passed, but after yellow had played a combat card and green had passed, then red went ahead and played a combat card. Remember that the playing of combat cards stays open until everyone in the combat has passed consecutively. So after red had passed, if yellow had passed and green had also passed, that would have ended everybody's opportunity to play a card. But because yellow kept it alive by playing a card, it had a chance to come back around to red, and he could legally play that combat card even though he'd passed. The other thing I wanted to touch on was how to handle the combat rewards when players have tied. The way they handled it was correct. When players tie for first, you just ignore that first one, and they share the second place rewards. But there are a lot of possibilities, and I can't cover them all here. What if 3 or 4 players tie for first? What if players tie for third place? And so on. If you're ever not sure how to handle tie situations with the combat rewards, the designer posted an extensive list of examples on the BGG forums, and I'll try to remember to post a link in the description. And that's pretty handy. You can just look at the list, see how your situation applies, and see what the result should have been. We've basically reached the end of the round here, so this is a good place to wrap up the challenge. I hope you got something useful out of the video. If you think I got anything wrong or have questions, don't hesitate to leave a comment. Again, I'm Carter Maxwell. This has been Rules Challenge, and I hope to see you again soon.